Hello. Today I want to explain anxiety. Um, it's something that occurs very often, and basically everyone has, to some degree, has it, or at some stage in their life has like a very anxious period, and not a lot of people understand where it comes from, and therefore they just attribute it to anxiety. Um, uh, uh, without understanding what it is and what is causing it, and therefore they go for to get meds or coping mechanisms to try to resolve it. It's something that is um, pretty simple if you break it down. So I'm gonna break it down into each kind of segment that contributes to it or creates it, and the goal is to just create a better overview of what it actually is and what causes it, and that will allow you to understand how to completely resolve it or understand its nature better, which will let you, do what you want with it. So, first of all, okay, I'll do like an overview of what it is, and then I'll do points reinforcing it. So, anxiety is caused by lack of intelligence or lack of knowledge or inability to correctly weigh or predict outcomes. What do I mean by that? Um, everyone, okay, let's say you are trying to do something. This is you, and you have mm, um, a potential future, right? And there's obviously going to be many potential futures because, you don't really know what will happen if you do first thing or second thing or third thing. You're not really sure, but depending on your actions, the future you might experience will change, or even sometimes independently of your actions. There's a lot of different, possibilities that could occur, right? I'm not talking about like, oh, splitting timelines. I'm talking about possibilities. So you have different. Well, I guess we'll just rewrite the possibilities. Possibility. So we have different possibilities that might occur, and they're everywhere and in all sorts of directions. Some of them are significant, and some of them are not. Some of them are dangerous. Some of them are not. Some of them are outcomes that we wish for, and some of them are not. Uh, so there's a very high variance in possibilities, or it might seem to be. Um, and anxiety is, at its core, when you are stuck anticipating these possibilities, and actually, I'm gonna add another layer before I explain it. So you have possibilities, and then you have, I don't know, modifiers or deviators. I don't know what other word to use. Let me think. Um, actions or something like that, right? And those actions might or might not somehow contribute to possibilities. I think I will show it like this. So some actions might correlate to certain possibilities, and some might not. So that's why I'm not showing it in like a linear way. So you have potential actions, and potential possibilities. And there's for you, you might not have mapped out the connection between those, or you might have a vague connection, but not necessarily a linear one. So you have a whole bunch of actions you can do, and you have a whole bunch of possibilities, right? And anxiety is when when your consciousness is starting to get is anticipating all of the actions that you can do and anticipating all of the possibilities that could occur. And your brain is just getting torn apart. Your consciousness is getting split between all of these actions and possibilities. Um, what if I fail a certain test? What if I don't study? What if I do this? Will they hate me? What if I do this? Will they um give me what I want? Did I just make them uh, think less of me? Blah blah blah. So um, the kind of like each action might contribute a little bit to each possibility, and each possibility might give more weight to a certain action. So the more of these you have, it's not like a linear increase, it's almost like an exponential increase. The more um, the more possibilities you have, the more it interacts with existing actions, and the more actions you consider, the more possibilities it unravels. So it's kind of like a self-reinforcing thing, and it very quickly can spiral out of control. Where um, one moment you were thinking about five possibilities, and now you've managed to uh, complicate it into 100 possibilities and 100 actions, and now you're when you're considering what to do, what action to take, instead of having three options, you're going to have 100 options, and that becomes extremely complex, and it weighs down on your consciousness. And anxiety is when you're stuck in a state of being incapable of collapsing these actions, where you're unable to pick one or eliminate uh, actions that you don't want to do. So you're unable to collapse it from 100 back down to 3. Um, and the reason why people are incapable of doing that is usually lack of ability to decide either A on the outcomes they want, or B on they're unable to map how certain actions um, lead to certain possibilities. And they're aware of it, because if they weren't aware of it, then they wouldn't overthink it so much. For example, uh, anxiety is a thing that occurs if we were to do like an IQ distribution chart, anxiety occurs for people with above average IQ. It doesn't occur for stupid people because they think, like, to them, the world is very simple. There's actions that lead directly to the outcomes, and they're able to map it out linearly. So they're able to go action um, into possibility, and to them, there's not that many options and that they're considering, and that allows them to very easily make a choice uh, for what action to take, because their brain is mapped in a very simple way, and they might have those free choices, and they're like, well, what do I want? I want to enjoy this. And then they just immediately forget everything else, and they've just collapsed their, possibilities and actions that they're gonna take, and they've just solved anxiety, right? Dumb people don't have this problem. Smart people also don't have this problem because they're able to collapse the possibilities in another way. I will explain it a little bit later. Uh, But medium IQ people are they're smart enough to create a lot of actions and possibilities and consider many different options. Uh, but they're not smart enough to eliminate them. And this creates a situation where being a little bit smart is actually counterproductive for anxiety. Anxiety is a byproduct of being a little bit intelligent, but not intelligent enough to solve the whole problem. And the answer could be um, when you speak to people like this, a lot of them are like, yeah, these stupid people just don't realize the complexity of life, blah, 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 blah. Or they're so ignorant, blah, 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 blah. Except, and they use it as like an excuse, like, I'm suffering so much because I'm better. And in reality, that is kind of false in a sense that, yeah, you are smarter, but you're still suffering because you're too stupid to be like smart enough to collapse it. So you're not actually suffering because you're smart. You're suffering because you're a little bit smart. If you were actually smart, you would not have this problem. So, eh, I guess the point I'm trying to highlight, a lot of people make this into their identity, and they're like, "I'm suffering because I'm smart." And what I'm trying to highlight here is like, no, you're getting a double-edged sword because you're smart enough, but you're not smart enough to wield it properly. Therefore, you're still cutting yourself. So you're suffering because you're not smart enough. And the question becomes is like, okay, is it easier to become dumber to resolve anxiety, or is it easier to become easier to resolve anxiety? I would say it's very hard to go back from, like, once you know something, once you've considered something, or you're prone to this, it's extremely hard to become dumber. It's a bit non-linear. Our intelligence, it's very hard. For example, I don't know, you might have seen something really fucked up happen, or something, you've seen something very strong, and you might try to repress it, suppress it, but that takes extreme amount of effort, and that also reduces your um, flexibility in like how well you're able to, use your own brain if you're constantly suppressing things. So generally becoming smarter is the more effective approach. It's a lot it's maybe more painful short term, but it's a lot less painful long term. In that regard, and a lot of people, go to things like alcohol or whatever is like, oh, when I drink, I'm so social. Yeah, because when you drink, you're fucking retarded relatively, and then you're not suffering from your medium intelligence, and you just get to experience life on easy mode. Yeah, of course, drinking is gonna make you feel more social and less anxious. But if you were more intelligent, you wouldn't have that anyway. So, you're just trying to fill your own incompetence with, external solution, which is bad, and I'll explain. I've I will release a video on that another day. Okay, so let's say, okay, so we know what anxiety is caused by. Its inability to map out the actions and possibilities. And let's go into like detail of how that actually manifests. So let's say you are, well, okay, there's a lot of angles on this. So let's go in possibility A Actually, no. We're gonna do a live example. Let's say there is you, and you're talking to a friend, a person, right? And you um, and we're gonna just evaluate one action. So you say, I don't know. Let's say you give them advice, right? You give them advice on something, right? And there's multiple possibilities on how they might react. So option A, they might appreciate it, or actually give them advice. Let's go even more simple. Give them spend time with them. Something very simple, right? You're offering something like your company, right? Or even more simple, console them, right? They might have, just failed an exam. Actually, I don't know what this word means. uh, Offer something. Well, okay, let's just go back to original. I think it's simpler. Offer advice. So here's the plot. Your friend has just failed all of his exams or something. A major failure in their life, and you could offer some sort of support or advice or help, right? And or you might be tempted to do so. And how they might react to this advice. Let's say you didn't fail your exams and you're like, hey, like you should try this study method, you should try doing it this way instead, you should not do this, blah blah blah. They could appreciate it and listen. The other could be like get mad and judge, and the other could be don't care. So appreciate it and listen is obviously, they take your advice positively and they're gonna be like, oh, thank you so much for helping me. I'm definitely not gonna fail next time, now that I know all of these things, you know? I appreciate your help. They get mad and judge is like, um, who are you to tell me how to study? Uh, Stop looking down on me, blah blah blah, you know? If they're very emotional about it, it's a very common response. And don't care is they just don't care about your opinion on this. You don't mean enough for them to consider it. Like they don't respect you enough. They don't think you're intelligent enough to be offering this advice. And um, okay, so those are it's in reality it's going to be more complex with a lot more nuances, but those would be like the three main branches, right? And if you don't know anything about this person, you don't actually have any way of knowing which one of these is going to be. Well, okay, there's two elements here that um, lead to you being unable to collapse it, which is importance and proclivity. Um, I will explain importance first. So, in engineering, there's a concept that I learned when I was at university, which applies onto this like perfectly. It's about finding out what is important and how much effort it takes. So there's a chart of things which are um, high. This is not exactly how they presented it. I'm just adapting it to the context. So we have high importance and then low importance And then, wait, let me think. It was risk and okay, we're gonna do it the original way because it makes more sense. So we have risk in terms of like how much time and effort is it gonna take, and then we have high risk, low risk, and then we have value. Uh, I guess value importance, same thing. Low value, high value. And if you were to plot it, every single task can be, or every single um, like possibility and action like sequence could be evaluated in terms of is the like difference in outcomes like is that thing that important? For example, this friend, right? These three different outcomes that can happen, are they that important to you? Is it um does a lot really do you really care enough about them to like if they do get mad at you, so what? And if they do appreciate it or they do don't care, like the difference between them, how significant is it to you? So there's something about um splitting things into how important it is to you. So let's say fuck, I don't remember if this is accurate, but let's say they're extremely how should I say until you have like thought about it, it's very easy to like unconsciously be like, wow, this person's opinion is very important to me. And unless you have consciously like placed it and evaluated it. What I mean by that, unless you have consciously went out there and considered the importance of something, it's probably going to have a relatively high importance, especially if you're prone to anxiety. Uh, So in this scenario, what this means is that you care about how they respond. So there's three different possibilities in how they respond, and to you, um, all of those are in the high value category. And I really don't like this chart for this example. Actually, I'm not gonna show it. So Um, okay, let's break down it in terms of importance. Let's continue the chain. I think it's gonna make more sense. So appreciate it and listen. Like, what does that mean? Um, I don't know. They value you more, or something like that, right? That's gonna be like a potential outcome, or they like you more. Let's say value, right? Like you've shown them, you've given them some help in a situation, and they might value that. And if they judge, then they it might strain your relationship or something. And third is they don't care. And what outcome does that have? None. Because they don't care, right? Nothing changes if they don't care. They might get frustrated with you. Right, and now if we look at these, they value you more, they get frustrated with you, and none. And then here, I mean, if they don't care and you give them advice, then you kind of wasted your time, you know, offering the advice since it had no impact. But the question is, how much effort did you put in to do that? And the question becomes something like, is it worth doing it if they don't care? And, to most people it's not, but it's also not guaranteed that they don't care. You might not know something about them, they might care. Or you might be even learning something about them by seeing their reaction. Um, I will explain that a little bit later. But for now, let's say you offered advice and they gave none, then yeah, you lost a little bit of energy by even, opening your mouth and speaking. And then if they get mad and judge you and in turn get frustrated, you spent some energy offering the advice and now they are mad with you and that has, created some negative reinforcement. Okay. And like, would you offer them advice knowing that they're gonna get mad at you? Maybe not. Maybe yes. Maybe that's what you want to happen sometimes, Maybe you want to tease them or annoy them, right? It's up to you whether that's significant or desired or not, right? And they value you more. For most people, that's probably their desired outcome. And is that is it worth giving advice if they value it and listen? Yeah, probably, right? For most people. But you might also not care sometimes. There are some people who you just don't care about enough, but you want to, sometimes it might be more desirable, to annoy them or something, or you might be doing it for other reasons. We're a bit more complicated. But for sake of this, if we just link offering advice to the potential outcomes that they might give, and then now what we do is we apply another thing where regardless of which one of these outcomes we got, like if you were to just say, I offered advice and I got this, then yeah, maybe it's not worth giving the advice, right? But if you add to it that by seeing the outcome that they go with, you actually learn something about them. Learn how they respond. Or you might know like what they think about you. For example, if they don't care, you know that they don't, take you seriously. And if they get mad at you and judge, you know that they're probably insecure and don't think highly of you, or like you're an object of jealousy or something like that to them, and they value you more, then you learn that they're a homie, they appreciate you or whatever, right? So now the question is, regardless of what outcome you got, if you get to learn something about them, is it worth it to give advice? So, regardless of what possibility is going to happen, is it worth it to give the advice just to learn how they would respond? I would argue that it is. And that allows you to collapse these probabilities into I don't actually care which one of these happens. Because regardless of which one of these happens, it shows me how the person reacts, and that allows it to me to, determine whether I want to continue talking to this person or how to interact with them in the future. So, for example, let's say you offer someone advice and they get mad at judge every single time consistently, then you have built a profile where You basically know how they're going to respond next time you offer them advice. And that allows you to map it out into a very simple sequence for that person. Now, next time they're, mad or something, or next time they fail their tests, and you know that it's going to follow this sequence because you have learned from the previous ones. And that allows you to escape the never-ending, like non-collapsing possibilities and actions because you have now collapsed it onto one. You're like, well, this person is mad. If I offer them advice, they're 100% gonna do this. So your action has now just gotten mapped directly to a possibility. You know exactly how they bind to each other, and that stops taking up, eating away at your brain. That stops, like, you stop worrying about it because you already know the answer. You don't have, you don't need to think like, oh, if I give him advice, how is he going to respond? You know how he's going to respond. You know that he's going to get frustrated. And this simple process of just mapping them directly just by, learning allows you to collapse the possibilities. And what you will find is as you start to learn one person's patterns or response patterns, then it becomes easier and easier to pick up on nuances within their behavior. For example, you will notice that if they're if you offer them advice when you're one on one, they might appreciate it. But if you offer them advice in public, where they might, feel like their status is challenged, then they might get mad. Or if you offer advice on things that you're not an expert at, they might not care. So you might notice little patterns and nuances that will help you understand and predict outcomes, and it will help you narrow them down. It's not completely random anymore, and there's not a million options. It helps you expect things, if that makes sense. So it's like if I offer him advice in his current state, he will very likely get frustrated with me, but there's a very small chance that he might not care because depending on how he views me. And even that, you could use the fact that he doesn't care to realize that, oh, this person, I've just learned that they don't, see me as accountable for this specific topic. They don't care about my opinion on maths, they think I'm bad at maths. That's kind of interesting because I aced maths. Um, but they might think that, and you learning that about their perspective allows you to accurately predict and determine how they will respond. So, oh, I guess I've actually went over proclivity just now and importance. So, I to summarize the point I've made is a lot of the time when you don't know what's going to happen, most of the time you should look at if it's important what is going to happen. And most of the times it isn't. Most of the time we attribute false importance onto things because we haven't actually considered the possibilities. For example, someone might have a crippling anxiety about a certain test result, right? And or it's like, oh my god, I failed my driver's test, right? My life is going to be over, blah blah blah. The reason why they might feel that way is because they haven't been able to actually analyze the importance of it in the context of the world. if you were to think about, okay, how many people in the world fail their driving license? How many people in the world have a driving license and are still okay? How many people in the world didn't even try to go for one? How many of the people in the world can't even afford to try one? Can I afford to try again? Is it how significantly will my life be affected if I don't get this driver's license? So if you're able to analyze things in terms of their importance, you're often able to stop stressing out over things that aren't actually important. And the problem with medium and low intelligence is other people are deciding for you what is important. And when you're subject to the opinions of other people, first of all, if you're medium to low intelligence, you're not going to know what other people will think of you. I don't know how my I don't know, friends will react to me failing a driver's test. Therefore, that's causing me to be more paranoid about it or something like that. So, inability to figure out people's proclivities, you also become incapable of judging importance of things. And vast majority of things are not important and are only artificially important. For example, uh, when I was at school, I think I noticed was all the teachers were saying how important it is to get good grades, right? And how key this stage of their life was. And then when you were to ask the same teachers or any university student what grades they got, none of them could remember them. None. Like literally none of them remembered their grades, which shows that it was so not important that they didn't even bother remembering it, which means that it wasn't affecting their day-to-day lives up until that point, which means that the what your grade is barely affects the outcome of your life, like 10 years or 20 years down. Therefore, should you be weighing it as if it's the most important thing in the world? Probably not, unless you have a specific, path or goal to which that might be important. For example, you want to be a doctor, right? That shit takes like 10 years to study, so you need to do it kind of early, and you need to also get really high grades to become a doctor, right? So if you have, um, let's say you want to become a doctor, then it becomes important to get grades, right? But then the question is it derived from another false importance? Do you actually care if you become a doctor? What if you don't get the grades and you don't become a doctor, and instead you become, I don't know, something else? Is that even significant? And a lot of the time you'll naturally just go, yes, of course. But if you actually reflect on why you think it's significant, you will find that all of those generally are artificially created. You don't want to be a doctor because you want to be a doctor. You're a doctor because you were told that that is desirable and you have believed it. There is a possibility where you go, you get all your grades, you study for 10 years, and you become a doctor, and then you realize that that's not what you were fucking interested in the first place. Then you have just wasted, 10 years of your life. And that's a possibility, right? So, how should I say? A lot of the time, you don't have the intelligence to know what you want, and but it's possible to know what you want currently. So, for example, if you want the doctor right now because you're right now fascinated with medicine, then yeah, it's probably a pretty good guess to go and work as a doctor or try to work as a doctor. Make that your path, right? Because you have a natural interest in that. If you have a natural interest in, I don't know, history or something, then that, how should I say, there's a saying, fuck, I'm not gonna go over the saying. Um, so I guess the question I'm trying to answer is how do you know what is important? And I'm specifically asking it in the sense of how do you know what is important in for your life, for your future? Because, a lot of it stems from there. Like, I don't know what I'm gonna do, blah blah blah. And the answer is fairly simple. Um, what? Uh, well, the nature of the question is you don't know what is going to be important to you like in 10 years, right? It's like there's a door and behind that door there is like a potential future that you might live, right? But you don't know if that's what you want, right? You have a possibility and there's many doors with many possibilities. And when you're trying to select which door to go into, let's say you're like, oh, I want to be a mechanic. Oh, I want to be a doctor. Oh, I want to be, I don't know, doing whatever the fuck else. And you don't actually, if you knew right now what it's like to be a doctor, if you knew right now what it's like to be a mechanic, if you knew right now what it's like to be whatever the other thing you're considering, then maybe you would not be so anxious because you would have already mapped out like the end result and from knowing the end result, it will actually allow you to make the choice. For example, if you know that if you were to pick the mechanic, you would be very miserable and you would hate your job. And if you were to pick doctor, yeah, you would actually enjoy it and you would be fairly good at it and successful. And if you were to pick something else, then you'll get, again, some deviation in some other way. Then if you knew this, then you were like, yeah, I'm gonna be a doctor, of course. So how do you get over this barrier of not knowing and trying to guess something without knowing? There's two parts to this. There's um, number one, which is you should learn as much as possible. So what really helps is, let's say, going to someone who's already walked that path. Let's say you wanna be a mechanic, go talk to a mechanic. If you wanna be a doctor, go talk to a doctor. If you wanna be something else, go talk to them. And just find a way to talk to them. And from doing that, you will learn about them, and it will answer a lot of your questions or doubts. And if ideally you do both, but if that's not possible, well, you can also simulate it. Like you could just project. Like if you're relatively intelligent, it's not that hard to do. It's like, okay, I'm a doctor. What do I do? How much do doctors earn? How much do doctors work? What kind of work do they do? And then you just imagine yourself doing that, which isn't that hard to do if you're intelligent. It's not that hard to do at all, actually. Well, I don't know, maybe a bias, but I don't know. For example, let's say, like, do you like talking to random people? Because you will have to talk to patients as a doctor. Like, what kind of practice are you going into? Are you going to be a general, or are you going to be a surgeon? Or, you know, if you're a general doctor, be ready to just answer stupid questions all day, you know? Uh, if you like to be a surgeon, be ready to have someone else's life on your hands, you know? And if you can imagine yourself in that room and consider, okay, if I my hand twitches right now, this person dies. Does that is that does that sound interesting to me or not? Like to someone it might be interesting, and to someone it might not. So that level of responsibility, and you can, imagine that and figure out, like try to flesh it out. They so learn. That's what I mean by learn as much as possible and simulate where you can't ask people. Uh, and the other thing is always assume that you are who you are now. What I mean by that is a vast majority of people don't change that much across the duration of their life. So if right now what is interesting to you is, um, let's say right now you're really interested in cars and you don't care about being a doctor at all, right? It's like not interesting to you. Then assume that that's not going to change in 3 years or in 10 years. Even if you were to go and become a doctor and do it for 10 years, assume that you're going to be interested in cars because that's most likely what's going to happen. What I mean by that is, yes, maybe your interests might change, but always prioritize ones that are true today because you don't know what direction you're going to change across 10 years. Let's say this is, um, if we're doing like a possibility chart or whatever. Uh, let's say this is your starting point, and you could have like a branch out of how you could change, and then it branches out again, and then it branches out again, and after a while you're left with, oh, that's a bit wrong. Let's say, it keeps branching out and it becomes more complex. You get the idea, like it's a probability diagram, right? So by the time like a lot of iterations of this have happened, which they will have in 10 years, you might uh compared to like now is something you can look at where you are right now and like capture the moment of where you are right now and learn everything about yourself that you are now. Let's say in 10 years after all of these, things that could have changed you happened, there's so many different possibilities of what you could become and be that it's impossible for you to predict in which way you will change. It's impossible for you to figure out what chain of possibilities it ended up becoming. And if you were always thinking really far in the future, you're always going to have a very large amount of possibilities. And because of that, you're also going to be split between them and you're going to be very anxious. It's the same thing as having, a lot of things in possibility if you look very far into the future. So the further you go into the future, the more uncertain it becomes. And the more uncertain it becomes, the more possibilities there are, and the harder it is to collapse them. But your current state right now, that you can collapse much more reliably. And if you were to work with what you have, you can't really go wrong. It's kind of like, how should I say, like the accuracy, uh, you're going to be more accurate in understanding yourself the closer it is to your current self it is, if that makes sense. For example, you're trying to measure something, and there's a table or something, and you could be just trying to guess its length, or you can just go and measure it. Except for you can go and measure it right now directly how it is, or a tree. A tree might grow, and you don't know how much it might grow. But when is going to be the most accurate uh, period of time where you can know how long it is? It's going to be today because you can go and measure it today. Even and in the future, there's going to be some variance, therefore it's going to be less accurate. And when something is accurate, it allows you to be more confident in it. And when you're more confident in it, it allows you to collapse the possibilities. So the point I'm trying to say is you should have a bias for who you are today and dismiss things that are really far in the future or really far from who you are today, or weigh them as less significant. So, for example, I might consider, um, I might still consider all the possibilities that might occur in the future, but I'm not going to consider them as much or as hard as I would consider possibilities that are less in the future, that are a little bit closer, because those are getting split by, uncertainty. And if I were not able to do that and I was to consider this to be as important as, let's say this, then like if I didn't have this bias for recency, then it would just get more and more complicated over time. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna try to wrap it up and make it more simple. So learn as much as possible and try to really think about the each possibility, because once you've thought about it once, it just how should I say, it might seem like there's a lot of things to worry about, but if you just slowly, day by day, just process each one and you just clean it up and you start adopting this process of binding actions and possibilities, eventually your brain will just get decluttered. And when new possibilities arrive, you will have already had the intelligence to like figure out um, what actions to take. For example, let's say you had this friend, right, who was frustrated with you every time you offered advice. Next time you meet someone who has very similar personal traits, personal attributes, you are going to know how to handle that situation. And which means that it's going to spend less uh, it's going to spend less resources in your brain because you already know the answer. And if it spends less resources, if you were to do that with all people, eventually you get to a point where you just understand everything everyone is doing, and it's not so random anymore, and you have nothing to be anxious about. Like, the anxiety comes from uncertainty, and that uncertainty is resolved by learning and becoming more intelligent. Okay, I think I've explained it actually.